Welcome along to the Unseen Wisdom. This is where we try to look past the headlines, really get underneath the surface of what's shaping things.
That's the goal.
And if you find what we do here helpful, maybe take a second to hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. It really does help us keep these deep dives coming.
Absolutely.
So today we're focusing on that recent meeting between South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and the former U.S. President Donald Trump.
Yeah, quite a bit of buzz around that one.
Definitely. The news reports left, well, a lot of questions hanging, didn't they? We've pulled together coverage from places like Newsroom Africa, FOX5, DC, First Post, The Sun, Dawn News English, trying to piece together the different layers.
It's crucial to look at multiple sources on something like this.
Exactly. So our aim today is to, go beyond just the handshake photos. We want to unpack the goals of the meeting, those concerns Trump raised about South Africa, how the SA government and others responded, and also touch on related stuff like technology and investment that came up.
It's fascinating how one meeting can sort of act as a lightning rod for so many complex issues, isn't it? Historical context, future relations, it's all in there.
It really is. And what stands out right away is that Ramaphosa initiated this, didn't he? He called Trump directly.
Yes, that's right. It wasn't, say, a standard State Department arrangement. This was a direct outreach.
And he brought quite a delegation, not just ministers, but trade union people, business leaders.
And even sports figures. Ernie Els was there. Gary Player was apparently invited too, but couldn't attend in the end.
Right. So a broad representation. Ramaphosa said the main goal was, and I think this is the quote, to reset the relationship.
Reset. That's a significant word choice.
He pointed to long-standing ties, in space, energy, trade, things like that.
And you wanted to boost that trade, encourage more investment both ways. He mentioned SA companies in the U.S. and vice versa.
Yeah, building on existing foundations. He also, interestingly, thanked the U.S. for help during the pandemic, specifically mentioning respirators.
That adds a layer of goodwill, perhaps, setting a certain tone. And Trump, on his side, brought up the G20 summit.
Yes, happening in South Africa this November.
Right, and then the U.S. takes over the G20 presidency the following year. So looking ahead a bit there, too.
Okay, but let's get into maybe the most talked about part of this. Trump's concerns. This got a lot of airtime.
Understandably. He specifically focused on the safety of white farmers in South Africa. That seemed to be a key point for him.
He didn't just raise it, though. Reports say he actually showed Ramaphosa a video montage.
Yeah, featuring Julius Malema, the EFF leader.
Chanting, "Kill the Boer." Now, this phrase, it's incredibly loaded.
Extremely. Some interpret it literally as inciting violence against white farmers. Malema and his supporters, though, argue it's historical resistance symbolism, aimed at the system of apartheid, not individuals now.
But Trump clearly presented it as evidence of, well, a dangerous situation.
He did. And he apparently also showed pictures of white crosses,
claiming they were mass graves. Thousands of farmers killed.
That was the claim reported, yes. He linked it all to violence against white South Africans, said many are fleeing, and tied it to the land expropriation without compensation policy discussions in South Africa.
Wow. Okay, so that's a very strong narrative he presented. How did the South African side respond?
Well, President Ramaphosa's counter was quite direct. He emphasized the South African Constitution protects land ownership for all citizens.
He acknowledged the government can expropriate land for public use, like many countries can.
Exactly. Eminent domain, that sort of thing. But he stressed it hasn't really been widely used in practice.
And crucially, his delegation included the Minister of Agriculture.
Yes, and this is quite significant. The minister is white, and actually from an opposition party that's now part of Ramaphosa's coalition government, the GNU.
So what did he say?
He acknowledged there are serious issues with rural safety. Farm attacks happen, and they affect all farmers, not just white farmers. But he strongly stated that the vast majority of farmers want to stay and work in South Africa.
And he addressed the video Trump showed.
He did. He clarified that Malema leads a minority opposition party, and his rhetoric doesn't reflect government policy.
Okay, and the "kill the Boer" chant explanation.
The explanation given by news outlets and Malema himself, as we mentioned, frames it as historical symbolism against apartheid injustice, not a literal call for genocide today, though it remains deeply controversial, of course.
And the white crosses, were they mass graves?
No. Reports identified those as temporary memorials for a specific white couple murdered back in 2020. Not thousands of graves.
Right, a very different picture there. There was also another voice from the GNU, wasn't there? Al-Jamaa.
Yes, a representative from El Jama, another party in the coalition. Their point was more about South Africa needing self-reliance, less dependence on others, using its own resources.
And looking towards partners like China and Russia.
They highlighted those trade partnerships, yeah. Kind of asserting South Africa's independent path in global affairs.
Interesting. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Elon Musk and STARLINK came up.
They did. The discussion seemed to be around how Starlink might operate in South Africa, specifically navigating the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment, or BE, regulations.
The BEE rules, designed to address apartheid's economic legacy, requiring Black ownership stakes in businesses.
Exactly. And the suggestion was maybe looking at equity-equivalent investment programs instead of direct ownership stakes for Starlink. A potential workaround, perhaps.
And the potential upside of Starlink.
Huge, potentially, especially for getting internet access to rural, underserved areas. That could be a big boost for the economy, for education, even for government services.
Even Julius Malema has spoken about how vital internet is for young people in rural areas, right?
He has. It's seen as quite fundamental.
But there are always buts. Relying on Musk's company, does that raise flags? People might remember the situation with Starlink in Ukraine.
That's certainly part of the context, the implied threats back then about potentially cutting off service. It does raise questions about depending heavily on a technology controlled by one very outspoken individual.
And what about the local players,
Right.
the existing telecoms companies in South Africa?
They'd likely have concerns, yeah. Starlink represents significant competition, potentially disrupting the established market.
So pulling this all back together, U.S.-South Africa relations, where does this leave things?
Yeah.
What's the view from the U.S. side, officially?
Well, the U.S. State Department has acknowledged Trump's vocal concerns about violence in SA, but they've also said there's no credible evidence of genocide.
Okay.
They also apparently pointed to other friction points: South Africa's relationship with Iran, its stance regarding Israel. Those are ongoing issues in the background.
So could Trump's narrative damage South Africa's image in the U.S., affect tourism, trade?
Analysts think it could, yeah. Public perception matters. But paradoxically, the fact that the meeting happened at all might actually be seen as a positive step for relations. There was even talk Trump might attend the G20.
Interesting dynamic.
Yep.
And if the U.S. relationship does cool off,
Well, South Africa has other partners, BRICS, the EU. They could potentially step in to fill any gaps, economically or diplomatically. It's not entirely dependent on the U.S.
and we have to touch on the core issue of crime in South Africa itself, beyond the specific focus on farms.
Absolutely. High crime rates are a major challenge across the board, affecting all communities. And statistically, Black South Africans are often the most affected by many types of violent crime.
Is there talk of technology helping there? Like Starlink, maybe?
The potential's been mentioned. Better connectivity for police stations, maybe using drones for surveillance. Technology could play a role in improving policing efforts.
And the agriculture minister did stress that the government is treating farm attacks and related crimes like stock theft seriously.
Yes, emphasizing that they are prioritized as serious crimes.
So what really comes through here is just the complexity. You've got domestic politics, historical wounds, international relations, powerful narratives clashing, all converging in this one meeting.
Precisely. Trump's narrative hit certain notes, certain existing concerns, but the South African delegation pushed back with their own set of facts and context. It really shows how difficult navigating these issues on a world stage can be.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive for today. We've seen just how tangled the U.S.-South Africa relationship is, really highlighted by this Ramaphosa-Trump meeting.
Definitely. Very different ways of seeing the situation inside South Africa, especially around farmer safety and land.
And we've looked at how technology like Starlink and the push for trade and investment are also part of this bigger picture.
And that stark contrast between the story Trump told and the counterinformation from the SA delegation and news analysis, it really underlines how perception and misinformation can play such a huge role.
Which leads us to our final thought for you today on the unseen wisdom. We've laid out a lot of layers, a lot of different viewpoints here. So thinking about all that, what do you feel are the most critical things to watch in this interaction and for the future of U.S.-South Africa relations? Something to mull over.
Keep digging into those nuances.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us for this exploration. If you found it useful, please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll be back soon with another deep dive.